Welcome to Reimagining Data Workflows with Weaviate Agents. This is easily the longest webinar title I've ever hosted in my life. So I'm super excited about every single word in this webinar. We've got some amazing people with us. So we'll talk about Weaviate Agents and how they can affect the kind of applications that you build and the kind of things that you can do. So if we could move to the next slide quickly. So today we've got some absolutely amazing people. What happened to the slide? Can't see it. So today we've got some amazing people. So with me, I've got JP, Charles, and Tuana, which is a great team that is heavily involved with working on agents. And of course, Charles himself, he's the father of agents. Every morning, he wakes up, he logs into his computer machine, spins up an agent and goes, "Look, I'm your father." That's kind of how it goes every single day. So, all the jokes aside, I think we've got 60 minutes. They're really packed with information and demos and everything. So we will talk, we'll start with Charles, giving a bit of an overview of the Weaviate agents, and most importantly, why we even created them and where the idea came from. Then Tuana will show off the query agent. JP will talk about the transformation agent, and I will top it off with a personalization agent. Each one of those is like a purpose-built agent, which is super cool. But yeah, I guess it's time to pass it on to Charles. And Charles, tell us about the agents, where the idea came from and all of that.
Sure thing. Thanks, Sebastian, and thanks for the accurate description of how I wake up every morning as well. It's very true. But yeah, I'm really excited to kind of just give a quick little introduction as to why we built these agents and how we view them. And I think in the bigger picture, we see Weaviate agents kind of fitting into this broader topic of the agentic database. And that sounds very lofty and stuff like that, but really what we see is that, and what we believe is that it's become quite obvious in the last year that agents are quite transformative as a technology. They're changing how we write code and our workflows and stuff like this. And we're quite convinced that agents are also going to change and are changing how we interact with our databases. So what's interesting about the three agents that you'll see today, query agent, transformation agent, and personalization agent, I think, is that they have very clear analogs to classic themes in kind of databases. I think the query agent maps to reading from databases. I think the transformation agent is an example of writing, and then the personalization agent, just kind of gets back to this idea of how do you personalize or boost results for users, based on what they've done. So let's start with the query agent. I think it helps with a bit of a history of how we interact with databases, and it all started with SQL, which was structured, but you needed to kind of intimately know the schema of your database to interact with it. And then we progressed into drivers and ORMs, which kind of greatly simplified how we can communicate with our databases. You can do it with client code, and you didn't need this kind of extreme kind of knowledge of the schema the way you might have had to with SQL. And then kind of in the last couple of years, you've had RAG, which has been super cool because it's actually allowed you to interact with your database in an unstructured fashion, and that you kind of just pass in vector embeddings and you get back results, and you feed that into an LLM and you get things back. But with RAG, something quite important was also lost, which is the structure. You have you get these amazing results because embeddings kind of are semantic and unstructured. But sometimes we need a bit of structure in what we're bringing back as well. And oftentimes this structure can be inferred from the natural language text of the query itself. And that's where a query agent comes in that we see it as an autonomous operator over your database. So if you ask a very complex query, well, it's the queries agent's job to break that query down into the components that it might require. So that might be multiple queries. It might be filtered queries. It might be queries and aggregations if part of your search. requires like a kind of a numeric aggregation, like a count or a sum up or something like that. And effectively with the query agent, the idea is to pass over that responsibility to it and let the kind of the multi-stage agent that we built navigate kind of the Weaviate for you as an expert operator. And we've specifically, trained it and designed it to be able to utilize Weaviate's APIs as an expert user. So that's the query agent kind of briefly, but we'll have a kind of an in-depth demo during this talk as well. So following that, then you have the transformation agent. And I think the problem that the transformation agent solves is that oftentimes with your data, you might want to enrich it or pre-calculate some values for your data such that at query time it's like the values are there and available and cheap. You can kind of filter on them or search on them at query time relatively easily. So a lot of times when people have databases, they might manually figure out ways to do these transformations. But where these types of transformations get very hard is when there's like a semantic aspect to them. So you could imagine a translation task or a classification task or something like this. And that's hard to do. It's very hard to do in a rule-based setting. But with LLMs, we know it's quite easy. So with the transformation agent, we've designed a system that can perform these types of transformations with a very, very simple instruction, but also, and this is really critical, at scale. So whether you have a database with 100 objects or 10 million, we'll scale up and make sure that we have enough compute in the back end to perform this transformation in kind of a reasonable amount of time that you need to utilize it. And then the great thing is you can create new metadata, which something like the query agent can actually utilize then to improve its filtering capabilities and stuff like that. So you see this pattern emerging where you can go from very raw kind of unclean data and trigger kind of a set of operations via the transformation agent. And then all of a sudden you've got this transformed kind of structured data set all of a sudden that you can utilize. And then finally, the last piece is the personalization agent. And I think this is a real classic problem in search and recommendation that every database kind of tries to solve. And the way we look at it is that, search and semantic search is great, but there's actually limitations to it as well, which is that oftentimes in these systems, there's users interacting with them, and users are not static. Users and personas have different intents and different dislikes and likes and all of these types of things. So with the personalization agent, we kind of introduce a very simple API to allow you to track and record what we call persona interactions. And you can add details about what are like kind of properties to a persona. So let's say if my data set's about movies, my persona can have items like the genres I like, the directors I like, my language and stuff like this. And what we do is we combine kind of classic ML algorithms to solving personalization and recommendation with LLMs and agents to kind of mix those results in together. So we track these interactions, cluster them all together, but then we use an LLM to do re-ranking and boosting and make decisions about what might be the perfect fit for you based on the objects that are returned. And with this, we kind of have the ability to offer non-static recommendations or non-static personalized search to our users. So if you, as a user of a system using the personalization agent, have, I don't know, like me, if you're into horror movies and stuff like that, the idea would be that if we give you basic recommendations, that you'll see some horror movies in there. And then if you start searching, that will like bubble up movies and things like that that are effectively in that genre up to the top of the results. So each result set is customized to you based on your preferences. But yeah, so that was just a very kind of brief overview of the three agents and kind of our thinking as to why we went to build them. But I'll hand it back to Sebastian now to go deep in on each of the different agents we built. Thanks.
Thanks, Charles. This was awesome. And yeah, you pass it on to me, but I'm actually going to pass it to our query agent expert of the day, and that's 𝐶uana. And she's got like an awesome demo prepared, and I can see her already super excited. So 𝐶uana, the floor is yours.
All right. Hopefully you can hear me okay. And with that, I will start with the query agent. So I think, Charles, you gave a pretty good overview of what the query agent is and does, but let's look into a bit more detail here. So long story short, with the query agent, we are going to be able to ask quite complex questions about data in Weaviate. And when I say data in Weaviate, I mean data in Weaviate. So it doesn't really matter where in Weaviate that data is. But to understand the type of problems the agent tries to solve, we can start with an example. By this point, I feel like everyone knows and loves, which is RAG. So imagine a system where you have some information that resides in Weaviate. The classic way that RAG works is that you might have a query from the user and you have a prompt, and then we augment that prompt with the most relevant information in our knowledge base. So this might be a Weaviate collection. And then we ask a large language model and it generates a response to that user's query. Now, this is all great, but the problem is if that the information that we're after resides in multiple locations, and in the Weaviate world, this might be multiple collections, this is where the classic approach of RAG might hit a bit of a brick wall. The reason for that is we need a bit of a decision step as to which collection to have a look at and which collection to retrieve the most relevant information from. So I would summarize the basic purpose of the query agent being that instead of us making the decisions as to where to look and how to search, we're offloading that cumbersome duty to a large language model who can take the wheel for us. So how does that work? Well, in Weaviate, because it's a vector database, I think the most common search methodology that people think of is regular semantic search. But as Charles also mentioned earlier, it might not be the case. It might be the case that we need to do semantic search for some queries, but for some queries, it might be that we have to do aggregations. And you can think of aggregations as a maths problem. So instead of the search requiring some vector search or semantic search, it might require, for example, a count of a certain property. So the way the query agent works is that it'll both be able to access all of the collections in our Weaviate cloud cluster, and on top of that, it'll be able to decide whether to do search or aggregations. So if we were to go through the steps of what the query agent does, based on the user's query, the agent will decide which collection or collections to access and search through. It'll determine if we need regular semantic search, aggregations, or both. Both might be needed for the same query. It'll formulate the Weaviate query for each search that will be made. And then it'll determine the filters for each query if necessary. Maybe we don't need any filters. And based on the results from all of these different searches across all of these different collections, it'll give the user a final comprehensive response. So let's imagine a scenario where we have two collections, and we're actually going to build this in a bit. We might have a collection that contains books and another collection that contains movies. And let's say the user asks, what are some good fantasy films that involve elves? The query agent might go ahead and produce this specific search query that says, search through the movies collection, and my query is fantasy films with elves. And the cool thing is here is that the query agent is also responsible of generating this query to begin with. So if you're familiar with agents, you can think of search and aggregation being two of the tools that are available to this agent. And the agent is also able to produce the Weaviate-specific queries that they both accept. But if we flip the question and say, which author has the most books in the fantasy genre? And this is actually a query I tried earlier today, and this is the exact aggregation query I got. So you can see that it is counting the top occurrences of any author where the description is similar or has fantasy elements in it within the books collection. This is actually also a surprising aggregation for me because this collection also does have a genres property. But again, I don't think we actually mentioned this, so maybe this is the perfect time for me to say all of these agents are in preview right now, so they are changing. And with all of the demos, we would love for you to try them and let us know what you think. And this one is one that I built for this presentation, so we can start looking at that now. So we're going to build a movies and book recommender, and this is where JP or someone, I'm going to ask that you tell me if my screen share to the Colab has worked, because I just
yeah, we can see it.
Okay, great. So I've done a few of the things that we have to do, which are boring. I've installed the Weaviate Agents client. I've set up my client. I've connected with my API key and URL. And here, I think, is where the most interesting place starts. So as I mentioned, the query agent is able to generate both the search and the aggregation queries for us. So the way it does that is that it has a lot of information about the shape of every collection it has access to. Now, I'm not going to run this cell because I already have the movies and books collections ready in my Weaviate Cloud account, but this is how you would create them. As you can see, we've got a books collection being created here, but the most important thing is that we're also adding a description. And you can think of this description, as well as all of these property descriptions, as extra context that the agent LLM has access to while making decisions on which collection to search through and also what properties to maybe filter on or search on, etc. So we've created two collections here, a data set that lists books, the authors, description, and genres, and another one called movies, a data set that lists movies, their ratings, original language, etc., etc. We've also gone ahead and given descriptions for every single property here because it's always good to have. This is always extra context that the agent will then have to decide on filters and aggregations, etc. I'm not going to run that. I already have access. I also commented this out. All of these data sets are available to you on Hugging Face datasets. So if you do want to run this exact demo, you just have to uncomment these and you can write all of the data that we're working with to your own Weaviate collection. All right, but now let's start building our agent, and this is where you wish me luck. If this doesn't work, I also have a Colab where all of the code has been already run, so you can look at the results. But I think it's been going well today, so hopefully this runs all right. So we're creating a query agent, and what we're doing is we're basically telling the agent which collections it has access to. Our client may have access to multiple collections, but we can also decide to give access to specific ones. So here I'm saying you have access to the books and movies collections. Now, this is where we'll start to run our query agent, and we can start with a simple question. And we can go with the same one. What are some good fantasy films that involve elves? And when we run this and we display the response, hopefully it doesn't take too long, we'll also not only be able to see the final response from the agent, but also the exact searches or aggregations it decided to do and which collections it decided to do them on. Hopefully this is going to be all right. If it takes too long, we can switch to the other one. Okay. Nope, that's fine. And here we have the final answer. I'm recommended some films, looking good. And you can also see that it decided to do a regular search with the query fantasy films involving elves on the movies collection. There were no aggregations. I think that checks out. This question doesn't require any aggregations and so on. I can also see exactly which sources, so these are the object IDs in my Weaviate collection, that the answer is based on. Another cool thing we can do is, if we want to, we can provide that response or even something else as additional context to another query that we run. So here, I'm actually going to use the previous response so I'm able to ask for a follow-up question. And my question is going to be, and what are some books with a similar vibe to these films? So a similar vibe to these films, our agent will hopefully be able to understand that I'm referring to the films that it replied within the previous question. So if I were to run that, hopefully we'll be able to see that it's doing a search on the books collection. Let me know if this is taking too long, and then we can switch to the other Colab and I can show the answers. All right, so what it did was search this time through the books collection with fantasy books with elves in them, and we got a response. That looks great. Let's see what happens if I were to ask a question that blatantly is asking for an aggregation. So here I have the question, which author has the most books listed in our collection? So let's run that. And this time we should hopefully only see an aggregation query. All right, there were no searches. Stephen King is the author with the most books listed in our collection with 57 books. And here you can see that it's checked for the author with the top occurrences in the books collection. Perfect. Again, I can ask a follow-up question, and hopefully it can tell me if there are any films based on Stephen King books. And it should be able to understand that I'm asking about Stephen King based on the previous response. Again, it's decided to only do a search on the movies collection, and this time it decided to make the query movies based on Stephen King books, which is great. I still have a good response. This probably means that either the title or the description of the films listed in our movies collection contained information about it being based on a Stephen King book. All right, so let's ask a few last questions, and this one should require both search and aggregation across multiple collections. I'm interested in historical fiction. Can you recommend any good ones? Are there any films based on historical fiction? And on average, what's the original language that they were filmed in? So the last bit, on average, what's the original language that they were filmed in, should hopefully be checking which original language is mostly occurring in historical fiction films. So let's see if it can do that. This is the one that I had some issues this morning with. So we've got a final answer. We've searched through books for historical fiction books. We've searched through movies with historical fiction films. And we've also looked at any film that the overview resembles historical fiction, and we've checked which one what top occurrences we have for original language. So hopefully it should say most films are based on historical fiction tend to be in English, and this does check out. I did check it in the movies collection. One final thing I want to highlight about the query agent is the fact that you can also change the system prompt, which basically determines the way the agent should behave in a how do I put this? The way basically it's a blueprint of how the agent knows it should respond to you. So in this case, I have set the system prompt to be, please respond in short bullet point answers. So hopefully every time this runs, it should be responding in short bullet point answers. I could have also changed this, and this is another example I've given in the past, where we ask it to respond to the incoming user query's language. So in effect, we've built a multi-query agent, a multilingual agent at that point. All right, I think I took up maybe more than I should have. So with that, I'm going to hand over to JP for the transformation agent.
Fabulous, thanks, Tuana. Cool, let's swap screens. I'll just do that. Thanks, Sebastian. Cool. All right, so let's change gears and talk about the transformation agent, which I think Charles summed up really, really nicely. But so I'll start by talking about what it does a little bit more concretely. At very brief terms, in my view, you can describe it by saying it augments and transforms your data. So at a very, very basic level, you would start with some objects in your Weaviate database. You would specify some sort of operation or operations, as you'll see, and you end up with additional transformed objects, where you might, for example, in this case, have an additional property called categories. But let's step back a little bit, though, and talk about why. Like, why would we want to use the transformation agent? You have a typical data workflow that might look something like this. You have some sort of data, and what do you want to do with it? Well, quite often you want to do something, analyze your data. Why do you want to do that? Because you want to get to insights that will inform your actions going forward. More concretely, it might look something like this, which was what I was trying to do last week. I was looking to analyze our forum posts, and what I wanted to find out more specifically was to see if there are any patterns or trends and so on And the reason for that, for me, was to see if there's anything that we can do better for our users. And why is this a problem? Well, because our forum posts are wonderful sources of communication with our community, but as Charles alluded to earlier, they're not necessarily the most structured pieces of data, right? So forum posts look something like this, where you have some sort of user ID, date created, title, and so on. But this conversation, which you're seeing a truncated version of, is just a big, long, series of posts in an unstructured format. So what that means is it's very difficult to manipulate. So you can't group, filter. It's very difficult to aggregate, as Tuana mentioned in the aggregation example as well, right? You need some sort of structured data to perform operations like this. So why is the transformation agent? Because quite often your data looks like this. It's not quite what you're after. Your analysis is limited, and you don't quite get the insights that you need. And what can the transformation agent do for you is really bring that baseline data into something more in line with what you might want or what you might need. Okay, and how does it do that exactly? Well, there's a lot of, obviously very clever magic going on underneath, but as a user, what you need to understand is that all you need to understand really is that you send some instructions and a set of parameters to the agent, and the agent kind of does all the heavy lifting for you, which is kind of one of the themes of the day. It requests objects from the underlying Weaviate database, and then it transforms them to update or add properties, as we talked about, to give you that better version of your data. So with that said, let's dig into some code examples here. Now, I think Tuana mentioned it before, but again, I'm connecting to a Weaviate cloud instance because Weaviate agents are only available for cloud instances. So I'm just gonna connect to that. And I've got an existing collection called forum post. So what does that look like? It's very similar to what you saw in the earlier slide, but you have these properties called user ID, conversation, but it's not, again, a lot of very basic metadata and this conversation piece, which is just a big blob of text. And how do we use the transformation agent? It's relatively straightforward, as I mentioned before. So the main thing I want to do here is to add a column or property called technical complexity. And I just want it to be an integer, and I want that to be based on the conversation between the forum users. And all I'm saying here to the agent is, hey, rate this conversation as on a scale of 1 to 5, to rate the technical complexity of the forum post. And if I run that, I'm going to create this object called add technical complexity. And actually, I can also create multiple operations and run them all at once, because I might want to add multiple things like, hey, what domain was this forum post about? What's the root cause? What motivated the folks to post on our forum, and so on. And I can define all of these operations in one go with different properties like Boolean data types and text ones you see down here, or integers like the scores. So I can define them all in one go and run the transformation agent. So you can see I'm instantiating the transformation agent here. Try and say that quickly 10 times. And run this, and it'll start the set of operations on my forum post collection. So now you can see that cell's executed, but that's not quite complete because it's an async operation. So I can get the status like so, and it'll tell you that it started at this particular time. You can refresh this every so often, but I'm kind of lazy, so I've just written a function that'll check the status of this in a while loop. And while that's happening, let's go back to our slides and talk about that a little bit. So what I'm doing is actually updating about, I want to say about 500 or so objects, but I'm actually performing all of these operations. It's really about 4,000, or so operations that's happening here. And you'll be surprised at how quickly all of this runs, which is really, really cool. So at the end of the transformation, which we'll see in a bit, we're going to have all of these additional properties on our data. And that's going to be created automatically for us, or semi-automatically, based on our instructions. And under the hood, what's happening is that the transformation agent is connecting to a generative model with our instructions and the base objects, and it's getting these new properties back to enhance our objects. So when we're done with all of that, we'll see that we can get more insights out of data. So here's something that I put together earlier, as the chefs say in their cool videos. On the x-axis, I've got the type of questions we have, and on the y-axis, I've got the reason that they were posting on the forum. And you can see here that there's maybe some potential challenges with folks understanding conceptually how some of our queries work, and perhaps getting the right configuration for deployment. And that's really cool. And what we're able to do then is to do one of the other things that Weaviate's really good at, which is to perform RAG with our data. So now, because I've got these additional properties like the root cause category and technical domain, I can now filter data using those properties and ask questions like, hey, so I've noticed people are having issues with conceptual aspects of queries. What common causes are there, right? And if we run that, I found that some people were, or commonly people were perhaps not having such strong understanding of filtering or perhaps search types and behavior. And what does that mean for someone like me? It means, well, maybe I should create some more content around this type of aspect. So to help people learn more about these concepts about search type, search behavior, and filtering, which I guess largely goes into the aspect of queries, but it really gives me actionable insights as to what we can do better there. And if I go back to my queries, it's still going. So I'll go a couple more slides. I think we're pretty close to the end. But what's enabled really these actionable insights was the fact that I was able to improve the quality of our data from this just raw, unstructured goldmine of text to slightly more structured aspects that we can filter and look through. So in summary, by improving the quality of our data, we can improve the quality of analysis and get better insights out of our analyses. And just to highlight how easy this is to do, of course, you can do all of these data transformations manually. But if you have a look at how easy it is for someone even like me to specify these operations, I was able to provide these instructions in natural language and ask the transformation agent to perform all that hard work for me. And that was really easy to do. And all of this analysis on my end took, I think, less than a day to do once I got the scraped data from the forum, which was really, really cool. Cool, there you go. So that's done in just under 3 minutes or so, or just about 3 minutes, 3.5. So that's pretty cool. And then if we now have a look at the properties, you can see there's all of these additional properties in our data, and it's basically done these like thousands of operations in just the time that I was talking. So yeah, it's really cool. I'm not going to go through the other queries just yet, but if you look at the notebooks, which we'll share in a bit, there are aggregation queries which are now enabled by these additional properties and so on. And it's a really amazing tool. I had a great time building with it, so I'm sure you will all too as well. So with that said, Sebastian, maybe I should hand over to you to talk about perhaps even more exciting agent, which is the personalization agent.
Thanks, JP. All the agents are super exciting. So yeah, like I'm not going to distinguish between Charles's children. They're all super exciting and they're super nice. So they're absolutely awesome. But yeah, for me, my favorite one will be of the day is the personalization agent. Yes, I am going to make it very personal. And so the whole idea of the personalization agent is about kind of like, okay, how can we provide recommendations based on what we know about the user? So this is kind of like a pretty good graphic that explains the whole concept, where on the right-hand side, you have your personalization agent together with your database and all the data that you have, both of like about the objects that you normally store, but also the information about different personas and of different users. And then the idea with it is that you can actually, with like very few lines of code, just like you saw for example, 𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸, the one with the query agent, you could ask questions that are related very closely to the user persona. This is super powerful, and I can't wait to actually show it to all of you. So why we even want to have this personalization agent, right? The whole idea is that imagine you have a friend and you want to buy them a birthday gift, right? And of course, because they're your friend, you want to buy them something that is based on what you know about them, right? This is not company event where it's like a secret Santa, you just join the company, you don't know anything about anybody. No. This is a very close friend. You knew them for years, you know all these things. So how can you actually buy them the gift? Like you think of like, oh yeah, Sebastian is a Liverpool fan. They just won the Premier League. He's super excited. I can get him a T-shirt. You know, he likes wearing red. You know, like go proud. And this is basically exactly it, right? Like how we can use the powers of the something like a query agent and power of Weaviate based on the information that we have about this specific user, and then buy them the best gift ever, right? Like winning the Premier League from Liverpool is already a good gift, but if you top it up with a T-shirt, that's always way better. And that's kind of like the idea. So, and then the idea is that as we go, we can, there's also a mechanism that allows you to collect information about every single user, right? You're building a persona based on their likes and dislikes, which kind of like creates this image of like, okay, what can I give you as a present, right? Like your, the things you like and dislike also changes over time, right? So we need to have a way to capture that. So in a more complex graphic, I want to show you, so this is kind of like the extended part. And the best thing is you actually don't need to know how it works on the inside to actually use it, but it's pretty cool to understand how it works. So on one side, whenever you make a request to the personalization agent, you could either say like, hey, without any context, just like tell me what this person likes, or you can add additional query to further drill in closer. And what we usually use from that is users' previous interactions, where we can kind of like capture their likes and dislikes, which builds up their profile. And then using that, we can then perform additional search queries. So say like, okay, I know something about your profile. I'm also gonna run a query and then dive deeper into that information, so that like combining both like the vector search with your likes and dislikes, we can extract the best sort of objects from our database to then return it back to the user. And this makes it like pretty accurate search than just like anyone asking any question without any context, right? And I think like the best way to actually handle it is dive into a demo. So I'm going to be slightly different from 𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸 and JP. I'm running my Jupyter notebooks in VS Code. So let me run through this. So just like before, we're going to connect to a Weaviate Cloud instance where I have all my data. And then in there, I have this collection called movie. So basically loads of movies in there. And then as one of the first steps, what we want to do is actually go and create a personalization agent. And then normally with the personalization agent, we could say like, okay, so this agent is going to work on the movies collection, and we will also have like additional information about each persona or each user. So maybe we should have things like what's their age, what are the favorite genres, what are the favorite years for like the movie that were released, and maybe even what languages they want to watch movies in. And basically, once we go and do this, this creates a brand new agent for us, which then allows us to do more cool stuff with it. So next thing is, what do we need? Okay, we need to create a persona. And then what's the best way to keep an eye on persona? We need to create a UID. So I'll create it based on my username and tag that I use on every single social media. Just for the fun today, I'm just going to delete it and then build from scratch my agent. And the idea is that when we create a persona, we have to say like, okay, so Sebavita, his age is 68. He likes sci-fi movies, horrors, mysteries, movies released in these years. They're his favorite, and he mostly watches movies in English. Yeah, I may look young, but I'm 68 apparently. So let's give it a go and let's run. So with this, This creates a persona for me, and we could very quickly kind of see like, okay, this is the information we have so far about my persona. Okay. So now it's time to start adding some interactions. Let's learn something about my user. So we have this helper function. If I call it, for example, saying like, hey, I'm looking for Home Alone, you return back a UUID of the movie in my database. So with that, what I can do using the personalization agent, I could say, okay, so I just watched Avatar, and I kind of liked it. So I'm going to give it like a 0.5 score. And basically the range is from -1 to 1, when 1 is you absolutely loved it, and -1 is absolutely hated. 0 is like a neutral, and then everything in between. So I kind of liked it, so let's put it a half. So at the moment, my persona is super light. So there's only one piece of information that I have. But already with this, using my persona ID, I could say like, hey, okay, show me the kind of movies that I sort of that will be based on what sort of I liked. And if I print it, you could see like, okay, there's Avatar 2, The Last Airbender, which if anyone is an anime, that's also an Avatar. Moonfall, AXL, The Matrix. It kind of checks out. At the moment, we're just kind of saying like, hey, no additional context, just based on persona, what other movies they may like. And that's pretty cool. But what we can do is make it more agentic. So we actually say like, instead of just running because this part was just running a vector search. So using like a centroid, which is an average of my likes and dislikes, I could kind of like find movies that are somewhat similar. But in this case, we can actually run a query and then also send it over to an LLM and just say like, okay, actually tell me more of like, what would be the 5 movies that I would like. And then, of course, this takes a little bit longer because LLMs need to do a bit more processing. But we could already see there's like, okay, so maybe here is some re-ranked results. So the re-ranked rationale is basically, okay, so based on some sci-fi and action adventure movies, here are like, some of the movies within the years that I might be interested in. And then you could kind of see that there's this slightly different movies. Yeah, Avatar 2 is still the first option. The Matrix is a way higher already. And then we have like some other additional movies that the LLM kind of like figured out based on the centroid of my vector and also my persona in the database. We could also, and this is where it kind of incrementally gets more and more powerful, which is super cool. We could add additional instructions, right? So, okay, so we know something about the user 𝐶𝐵𝐵𝐵𝐵. How about we could say like, hey, we're looking for a movie that I could watch with the whole family, and maybe something historical would be interesting. Historical, like all of them should be pretty fun for me and then the family. So let's run this. And then here's a new set of movies that we potentially watch with the family. It's still really close to sort of what my persona likes. And then as it turns out, like Avatar 2 itself also is still like a good movie for a family. But maybe the Time Machine is kind of like a new result that we can sort of see. And we could add even more instructions or more kind of interactions and things that I like. So how about we say, okay, I watched How It Ends, Dr. Sleep, The Howling, A Nightmare on Elm Street, High Life. And then I kind of quite liked most of them, especially A Nightmare on Elm Street. It's a pretty awesome movie. However, I watched Magic Mike and I nearly died watching it. It's like absolutely terrible. This is just for the demo purposes. Like anyone involved in the movie, don't worry. But basically, by adding all these interactions, I can enrich information about my persona, about my user. Right? So now we have all this information as part of my profile. So let's try to run the same set of queries as we did before. So we could just run simple search. And then in this case, you can see, okay, Avatar is still the first one. We have Son, we have Come True, we have Moonfall. So the results are already changing based on accumulated information about what I like and dislike. And then additionally, using the whole thing, maybe we could look for something that, like a subgenre of horror movie in slasher, and least favorite in space horror movies. And then what we can also do is add additional filters. So for anyone that actually use Weaviate, this uses exactly same syntax for the filters. So I could say like, okay, I specifically want to filter out any objects, and they should include either mystery or horror, right? Like if it's not a mystery or a horror, I want to ignore those results. So actually, in a way that that makes the job for the agent a lot easier, because it's got fewer objects to deal with. But overall, we can actually add additional information to each of our queries. And now we can see is like, okay, so based on what I like and the instructions, now we get Prometheus, Gattaca, it follows, Sun, etc., etc. And this is a super cool thing, because all of this is very personal to what I like and dislike. And again, this is basically how it goes with agents. We can actually build on top of that even more. So if you've used Weaviate before, we could run a hybrid search query. So this is one where we say run a vector search and a keyword search in one go. And then say, okay, so I want to run a query first, and I'm looking for historical adventure with 10 objects. And then this will actually run the query and even overfetch, get more than 10 objects in a way. And then coming back, we could say like, okay, and now apply my personal information with a strength of 0.95. So still leaning really strongly towards my likes, but on the other side is like, say, let's use 5% of the results that match the query, that is not opinionated on my profile, right? So we could basically change this between different scales. So you could say like, oh, just inform 75% based on my persona, or like making it a lot more, etc., etc. And then this gives me a new set of results. So you could pretty much run any type of Weaviate query together with that. So we get like titles and genres. And just to show you, Charles built actually the super cool function that helps us compare two set of results. So we can run the same query where you could say, okay, I want to run a hybrid search query on slasher. So it's the same query twice, but we'll compare it once with this persona on the level of 0.95. So use 95% of the personal information versus not at all. So the second one is basically just pure query, while the first one is like making it based on what I like and dislike. And you can actually see this is like the personalized information based on what I like, together with a bit of a query, versus this is what we would have received if this wasn't using personalized information. So with the left, this is how you can actually give way better output to your end users, while on the right is kind of just like the pure query, which is something that we normally used to. So the left side is definitely a lot more powerful. And we even kind of see like how many times we match the genre, the preferred genres that we're after. It's actually super cool. And then we could see that like with the personalized search, in general, we're matching on genres like 9 times, which is way better than if we did it without the personalization, because in this case you could literally get anything out of it. Yeah, and that's kind of what I wanted to show you about the personalization agent. It's kind of like a lot of the things we did with query agents as well, but like on steroids, with like a lot more information of what we know about the users. Cool. So we hope you enjoyed this session, and we can maybe answer some questions. We've published actually a series of blog posts, one about each agent. So there's one for query agent, transformation agent, and personalization agent. So you could scan these QR codes or take a screenshot, and then you could get into the blog post where we cover each of the agents in depth. And those are absolutely awesome. And if you would like to get resources, maybe you want to get the slides, or maybe you want to get access to the code, etc., you can scan this hidden QR code. There's a QR code on the right-hand side. So if you scan this, let us know. That we'll send you a follow-up email with all the resources and information. And yeah, maybe we could take some questions. I'm going to stop sharing.
Yeah, I can put some questions up if you like, Sebastian.
Yeah, let's do that. Let's do that.
Cool.
And
so here's a question: could this work if the data source is a large spreadsheet?
Yeah, I actually that's a really good question, Jerome. So thanks for it. And I think what's actually interesting about this is we've done some experimentation with this. So really, all you need to do is get whatever data is in the spreadsheet into Weaviate. And as another plug for Weaviate's Cloud Console, we've also recently added an import tool which can do exactly this, which is import files like CSVs and stuff. But I think what's more interesting about this question, which is that we have done tests where we import data into Weaviate from spreadsheets. And a lot of the time, spreadsheet data might not actually contain like semantic information, like descriptions or searchable text. But using the transformation agent, you can create like a text description or like descriptor column effectively on each of those rows that you have, which now makes like spreadsheet data searchable, which is really useful. Like the internal use case we've used is stock transactions, you know, where we just test it out and we put in a bunch of like different stock transactions on different dates and stuff like this. And then we create descriptions of those transactions of whether the price goes, you know, up or down or whatever. And now all of a sudden you can search it, you know, what was NVIDIA's highest trading day in you know, March 2024, and it will find that for you, all because you can now search over this data using natural language and the query agent. So I like this example because you can have the two agents interplay with each other.
That's so cool and super flexible as well. We've had a couple of variants of questions like this, which was, will the Core Lab notebook be shared? I guess what the answer is yes. Will everything be shared?
Yeah, we'll share everything, right? So that QR code that I shared at the end, we could maybe share it again. Yep. No, not the next from the next slide. Yep. Yeah, if you scan this QR code, you can sign up and we send you like slides and possibly the recording, etc. So yeah.
Fabulous. Yeah, and that includes the recording as well through that.
Yeah.
Cool.
Something else that might be worth adding, and then we can get back to questions. So you can use like all the agents with like the Weaviate Cloud Sandbox, and those are available for free. So you can create a free sandbox, and all the agents run from there. Like actually our demo runs on the sandbox, so like why not, right? Like it worked for us, it will work for you. So you can absolutely use that. Yeah, that's definitely worth knowing.
Fabulous. And this is not necessarily a question, but might be worth pointing out that Charles, this is for what's the best use of this side, do you think?
Yeah, so we've been using this page, this feature-based or Weaviate Agents.feature-based app effectively as a way to kind of collect and vote on feature requests and feedback and stuff like that, especially considering that we're in an early alpha stage. So the great thing about this stage is we can change and modify the behavior pretty easily, and like the API might be subject to change, but the great part about this is if you've got a use case that you're really excited about, that you think that the query transformation or personalization agent might be a fit for, let us know. Maybe drop some feedback here. We can reach out and effectively work with you on that. We have a lot of flexibility here, and we're also, we're looking to talk to as many users as possible to kind of build in these features that people would love to see. So yeah, definitely, if you have a feature request or even just a question, let us know. And find us on the community Slack or here at this feedback page here that's being displayed.
Cool. And that actually reminds me, I think Tuana, you and Charles have been speaking a little bit about some upcoming features and so on. Do you want to tell us more about, some of those conversations?
Sure. Yeah, I'm happy to do that. So there's quite a lot. We've got quite a big feature backlog. So the first kind of bigger, broader picture thing I'd like to kind of focus on is that we're really trying to hone in on making all of these agents work together. So for instance, you might have the query agent and the personalization agent running. Well, very soon you'll be able to also just pass a persona ID to the query agent, and it means any of the queries that the query agent will do will just be personalized to your preferences. So you can kind of make the query agent personalized if you need to. And the same kind of goes for the transformation agent, where we want to see if what can happen if you kickstart a transform via the query agent or something like this. And secondly, I think there's another kind of interesting topic we've seen pop up with the query agent, which is around this reasoning hops. Right now, the query agent effectively works as like a directed acyclic graph. It kind of works left to right, and it comes up with all these actions and works in one direction. But what we want to change with it is to add this more like a looping mechanism in there, where there might be, the query agent might determine that there's two distinct questions that need to be asked, but one has a dependency on the other. So what we're building right now is the ability to kind of map those dependencies and say, when question A is answered, then you can pass that context to question B to answer that. So we kind of call it like a looping or somewhat of a kind of a looped reasoning capabilities as well.
Cool. Got these great questions coming in, so it's kind of hard to choose. Let's pick this one maybe. So Usman's asking, hey, what are the ongoing backend maintenance requirements for all of this?
Great question. And thankfully they're quite low. The query agent, all you need is a Weaviate Cloud Sandbox or serverless instance, and the Weaviate Python client or TypeScript client coming next week with just a additional install where you do like pip install, Weaviate client, square brackets, agents. And then that gives you all the agents functionality you need. So we maintain the agents backend, and there's, it just works kind of magically with your Weaviate instance.
That's the exact word I was thinking of, was magic.
Yeah. Actually, this is, I really love it because it takes so little effort to run any of this, right? Like that's kind of like the thing, like and even the amount of code we showed you, if you build those agents yourself, you probably end up with like a quarter of what we built, because we're just trying to show you a bit of everything. In reality, you probably build most of your use cases like 20 lines of code, etc. Or depending on the use case. And this is what I love about it. Like when Tuana was running the query agent, you saw like this one-liners or two-liners, but they were running 3 queries underneath, like, hey, 2 regular queries and then aggregation and combining all the results and then printing them in a really nice way. There's like loads going on in there, and you don't need to be an agent, like an agent master. You don't need a PhD in any of this. It just works. It just runs. It's incredible.
Do you think we have time for a couple more questions?
Yeah, you got 3 minutes, right?
Cool. Yeah. Here's one about how this works. Does this use knowledge graphs?
So another really good question. So it's not explicitly using a knowledge graph, but it is actually something that I've thought about, which is that, I think the end goal of knowledge graphs, or what you see in GraphRag, that's kind of what we're focusing on here. And I actually think something like the query agent works towards the same end goal and kind of almost calculates a lot of those graph connections on the fly in some instances. So effectively the answer is no, it doesn't explicitly use knowledge graphs, but I think the query agent, for example, is our own kind of homespun solution to GraphRag without having to spin up a heavy graph database on top of your vector database at the same time.
Amazing. So I think, Tuana, should we share the links to some of the resources? I noticed you've posted some links on the comments.
Yeah, I tried to post each of the get started ones, but they were adding it as separate comments. So I'm going to add it as a comment to the general session. I also noticed a good question about whether this query agent, etc., can be used alongside other frameworks, external agents, and so on. And the answer is yes. And actually, our partnerships team has done a really good job of adding recipes for basically all of the frameworks out there. So if you go to the Weaviate recipes repository, I can send a link in the comments. There are examples of how, for example, the query agent is used as a tool for other multi-agent systems. So it's pretty cool. I'll send that over in comments as well.
And that is
Yeah, we can add them to the video descriptions as well on YouTube, right? Yeah.
Yes.
And that is a really great question, though, in terms of like this world we're moving into where agents communicate. I think the advantage here is you just map the Weaviate query agent, which is an extremely simple syntax, as a tool into whatever your agent system is. Pydantic AI, we're big fans of that too here. And then you effectively trust our agent that it's an expert in Weaviate. So all these experts are different domain experts, and ours is a domain expert of how to use Weaviate. So if you build a framework, you're using a framework, create a tool using the query agent, and then let the query agent do all its magic and work into your own system.
Perfect. Okay, I think we're on time, so I'm going to just share the screen with the QR code in case anyone wants to get any follow-up, additional information, and then learn with us, from us as we go as well. So please take a screenshot or follow the QR code. But yeah, Charles, JP, Tuana, thank you for joining me today for this session. It's been a pleasure as always. And then, yeah, let's all be super excited and work with the agents, right? So thanks a lot.
Thanks, Sebastian. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thank you for watching.